for joining us for our roundtable discussion. Today is March 31st, 2023, and at 11 a.m. this morning, the USDA released their quarterly U.S. stock estimates and their prospective planting numbers for the 22-24 year. Today, I'm joined by Pat McLaughlin, Clint McLaughlin, Stu Hughes, and Rich Berg to discuss the report. Stu, would you like to start us off today and review the quarterly stock numbers?
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Stocks numbers, face value, the corn stocks number was just slightly under the average guess. 7.40 billion was the average guess. They were looking for 747. Down from last year, but we also need to remember that demand this year is running about 8% lower than a year ago. So having a lower stocks number today, just a true gross lower number, is not necessarily bullish, but stock number was down 5% versus a year ago for the whole United States. Didn't really have any big surprises to me, except for maybe South Dakota. We knew Nebraska was down 30%, I believe, in the December stocks number. They were down 29 or 20% versus a year ago in March. Iowa down 9%, so maybe that might be where the trade was a little bit excited about the stocks number today. Illinois was up 5, Indiana up 7, so as kind of expecting, the Eastern Corn Belt in better shape than the West. South Dakota was up 7%. I thought maybe that looked a little strange to me. Bean stocks is where the story was. The average guess was 1.68, or I'm sorry, 1.74, and we came in at 1.68, so we were 247 million bushels below last year. Bean stocks down 13% versus this time last year, and our demand is only down 2.5%. So it does make sense that the beans reacted a lot stronger to the stocks number today. Individual states, Iowa down 21%, which kind of surprised me a little bit. That Western Iowa area must have a lot fewer beans than we initially thought. There is some talk maybe that the yield or production number was maybe a tick high for last year. So that's partially why we're seeing the lower stocks numbers. So, good reaction to that today. July futures up 28. Most everybody's bidding off of July here now. That spread got up to 26, 27 cents, or actually over that, 33 cents inverted today. So that's another reason why I've seen a lot of end users and processors get away from bidding off the May and bidding off the July. So some in substance, corn stocks number was not that bullish, but maybe a little bit of follow the leader action in corn with actually pretty friendly stocks numbers and beans.
Thank you, Stu. Clint, would you like to take a few minutes to talk about the overall acres and touch specific on some of the Eastern Belt area?
Sure will, Brenda. I'd like to just take a few minutes on these reports often and look at the all acres, because it feels like when we get just so driven on corn, soybeans, and wheat, kind of miss the bigger picture. And this helps to answer a lot of the questions of, where did all these acres come from, or where did they go? And a lot of it has to do with pretty big changes in the all acres here in the United States. So this is all of your major crops. And so really what I wanted to start with is, if you look back at 2021, so you go back 2 years ago, we had 317 million all acres planted. And so that was significantly more than last year. Last year we were down 5 million acres from 2021 at 312. Now North Dakota was a big culprit in that. North Dakota lost 2.4 million acres altogether last year from 21. Also, Colorado lost 571,000 acres. Texas lost 768,000 acres. Minnesota was down 371,000 acres from 21 to 22. So what we're really seeing here this year is more of a, and of course, this is just a planning intentions report, not a final number. So we all know that, you know, prevent plant and spring conditions can change these, you know, pretty rapidly. But basically what we're seeing here is all acres this year are anticipated to be 318 million, which is a million more than 21, but 6 million less than last year. So really what we're seeing is just a lot more acres potentially coming back online. And so I guess that's probably your biggest factor in the all acre situation is that we are up 1 million acres from 2 years ago, but that's a pretty big increase from last year. Corn acres, you know, in the Eastern Belt, there really isn't a whole lot of significant changes there. I didn't see anything that looked super out of alignment. You know, particularly Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, pretty well in alignment with last year. Ohio's up 50 million. Indiana and Illinois up 250 and 200 million from last year. So, you know, nothing super significant there. I would consider those states to generally be a little bit more consistent. Then you get into, you know, some of your other smaller states like Pennsylvania and Maine and stuff, minor changes there, but I didn't see anything super significant. Back to you, Brenda.
Thank you, Clint. So I'm just going to take a few minutes here. First, I just want to review the total acre numbers for corn, soybean, and wheat again this year. What they are estimating on the corn number is that there will be 92 million corn acres planted, which this was above the average estimate of 90.8 and also above the USDA outlook form of 91 million acres. In last year's final corn acre was 88.57 million. So that was an increase of the 3.43, kind of going back to what Clint was saying, the increase in the overall planted acre numbers. And then on the soybeans, the USDA is estimating 87.5 million acres planted this year, which came in lower than the estimate of 88.24, but is the same number pretty much as last year as well, and also as the Ag Outlook form. And then total wheat acres for the US this year, they are expecting 49.9, above the average estimate of 48.8, and also slightly below the outlook number of 49.5. That is a pretty decent increase from last year's wheat acres at 45.73 million acres. And then to break that down a little bit more specific, I'd like to touch on Wisconsin here, both the acres and the stocks. In Wisconsin, farmers are expected to plant 3,950,000 acres of corn, which is the same number they planted in 22, 21, and 20. Looking back over the last 8 years, Wisconsin has stayed fairly consistent around this number for their corn acres. For soybeans, Wisconsin producers are expected to plant 2,300,000 acres, soybean acres, which is up 140,000 from last year. And also looking back over the same 8 years, soybeans has not followed corn for consistency. There's been more changes in Wisconsin from year to year, with the low being in 2019 of 1,700,000, and the high being in 2018 of 2,200,000. As for winter wheat, it is estimated that there are 290,000 acres planted in Wisconsin, which is up 30,000 from the January report and down 15,000 from last year. So switching gears a minute to the stocks, it is estimated that there are 314 million bushel of corn in storage as of March 1st in Wisconsin alone, with 155 million of that being on farm. That total number is down 16 million from a year ago. For soybeans, the estimate is 52 million bushel, with 14 million of that being on farm. The total stock number for Wisconsin is down 2,300,000 from last year. And then for wheat, the total Wisconsin stock as of March 1st is 21,800,000, which is down 4,800,000 from last year. The USDA does not split out commercial versus on-farm storage for Wisconsin for wheat. But I think the stock number are important to keep an eye on, as all three major commodities are lower for Wisconsin than we were this point last year. So that potentially could be something to watch basis wise as we go into the summer months for the old crop commodities. So Pat, would you like to take some time to discuss numbers in Iowa?
Sure, Brenda. So, excuse me, corn acres came in at 13,100,000, up from 12.9, up 200,000 acres. And that also compares to 12.9 in 21. USDA is kind of getting honed in here again after the derecho year of 20. They had us down 600,000 acres last year on this report at 12.3, and obviously I didn't buy into that, and it came back to 12.9. And so I don't have any problem with these numbers this year. We are a corn state. We like growing corn. We have a lot of manure, and we had a great fall. So I believe those numbers, at least as far as intentions go, are fairly accurate. Iowa soybeans, interesting, have been 10,100,000 the last 3 years. And that's probably about right as well, about 300,000 acres of, 3 million acres of corn on corn. And we do like to grow our corn on corn here. So those are the numbers from USDA. I don't have any issues with them, and we'll see how we do down the road. Thanks, Brenda.
Thanks, Pat. Rich, do you want to cover the states west of the Mississippi?
Yes, I'll start off with a breakdown of some of the major changes in some of the states, and this will kind of overlap a little bit with what Pat and Clint talked about. But Iowa increased 200,000 on corn, no changes on beans. Minnesota increased by 350,000 on corn and increased by 100,000 on the beans. North Dakota was the big one. They increased corn acres by 800,000 and increased bean acres by 850,000. South Dakota increased corn by 150,000 and beans by 200,000. Nebraska reduced corn by 100,000, and Kansas increased corn by 100,000 and reduced beans by 450,000. Now that we're through the stocks report and the planning intentions, we'll probably be switching our focus to weather mainly. And as far as issues we could have, as was mentioned before, these are just estimates, and some of the problems we could run into. We do have the major snowpack up in the Dakotas and Minnesota, which could create an issue later on, and there could be questions come up like, will there be a switch from corn to soybeans because of late planting, or will there end up being some prevent plant acres? And it's just too soon to know for that. And then as far as the planting weather for the rest of the Midwest, in the 5 day, I think there's a little rain scheduled for northeast Iowa and southern Minnesota, but the rest of like Iowa and Missouri looks pretty decent, and the 5 to 10 day actually looks pretty dry for Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. So that's what we've got to look forward to. And as Clint said, these are just estimates, so we got a lot of weather to go through.
Thank you, Rich. At this time, I'd like to open it up to everyone. If there's anything more specific you'd like to talk about on today's report at this moment, or.
I'll chime in here on the stocks numbers. I kind of like look at those on-farm numbers versus the commercial stocks. Iowa corn this year down 18% on the commercial stocks. Farmer inventory was down a couple percent. I talked to end users on a regular basis, and I asked one particular one yesterday about who's got the corn left, and Kirsty's always telling me that farmers got all the corn left, and the commercials are already done moved all theirs, but facts are actually farmer in Iowa has just a pretty much exact amount of corn left on farm that he had this time last year. What we don't know is that corn is already sold. Just because it's sitting in his bin doesn't mean it's priced or unpriced. So that we don't know. But the severe inverses this year doesn't surprise me that the commercial stocks are sharply lower than last year. Inverted market forces that inventory out instead of them just rolling their hedges forward, especially into steep inverse. Same thing, beans, Iowa commercial stocks were down 24% from last year. And actually on-farm bean stocks are down 15. So bean basis has been higher here than a year ago. It seemed like the bean inventory number is one that we chase. You know, it's either last fall we were way high on the September one, and now we are way low on the March stock. So it's has been a challenging target on from the cash standpoint, but the spreads are telling us that stocks are tight, and I just like to look at the difference between on-farm and the commercial stocks. So I mean, the commercial stocks were a little lower than I thought they would have been.
Thank you, Stu. I think it's interesting to kind of go off of what Clint was talking about earlier of the increase of total overall acres. I spent a little time digging in to some of the other commodities and their acre numbers to try to kind of come up with how can corn and beans be up almost 2 million acres when, or excuse me, corn and wheat up almost 7 million acres when beans didn't change at all. And a lot of those smaller or other crops are down this year. Specifically, I found like cotton was down over 2 million acres alone. And then like sunflowers were down, and sugar beets and others as well. So that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're trying to figure out the ever popular question of where do they come up with all these extra acres. That's all the other commodities and their changes is something that we need to take into consideration as well. So, well, if is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, I guess
today?
I would like to jump in here just for a minute. Is, you know, I mean, just keep in mind, guys, that this is the most inaccurate report that USDA puts out all year long. Okay, it's just a very difficult thing to manage, to try to guess what these intentions are and weather plays a big role in this yet, in terms of whether or not we switch from one crop to another. And sometimes it's even outside the box. It's not even ever, you know, you're thinking, oh, we just lose, you know, corn acres, they go to beans. Well, no, I mean, Brenda just talked about cotton acres being down 2.5 million acres. Well, you know, a lot of cotton's grown in Texas. They're in the middle of a D3 drought. And if all of a sudden their conditions change, you'll see you can see a pretty big increase in cotton acres till pretty late in the game over there. You know, so you could have things like that happening. So again, very inaccurate report. The other thing I like to point out is, come June, these numbers can go up. When we sit here in June or in March, it's human nature to say, well, this is the top side of where it could be, and all we can do is chew away from there. Well, that's clearly not the case. They can be higher. We can get more corn acres. We can get more bean acres come June and come final numbers. And then the other thing that I would like to point out is that in the grand scheme of total production, acres are important, but yield trumps acres very, very quickly. And a very small adjustment in yield will alter the production significantly more than the acres will. So that's the bigger question. And sitting here today, we don't have those answers yet.
All right, thank you, Clint. I'd like to thank everyone for your input today. Also, thank you to everybody that watched our roundtable discussion. As always, visit our website, midwestmarketmanagement.com, or find us on Facebook for up-to-date information. Have a great weekend.